This is the Crush Your Mountain podcast with your host, certified health, life, and type 2 diabetes reversal coach, Henry Gaskins.
Hey, I'm so glad for you to join me today on Crush Your Mountain Wellness. I'm Henry, and we're going to be talking a little bit with my good friend and colleague, grief coach, Tony Lynch. And you've got to hear this guy's story. We're going to be really discussing how men process their grief and their trauma, especially the African-American community, and how unresolved grief can have terrible effects on our physical and mental health, including type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other challenges. Why is it important for you and me to release our grief in spite of the society's pressures for us to remain the strong, silent type? Now, Tony, he's a men's grief coach. He's an author and podcaster, and he shares his own powerful story and the trauma that he dealt with as a child, gang involvement, and all sorts of things like that. He's dealt with homelessness. We're going to hear about that. And we're really going to hear about how he planned his own suicide. What got him from the brink of that? We're going to talk a little bit about that, his realizing that he can help others. We're going to go really deep into the challenges that men face and how it really becomes evident in their need to self-medicate, deal with obesity, deal with liver disease, due to all of the other challenges of suppressing grief. It can lead to addiction, homelessness, other challenges. But this information is so vital for everyone to hear. And I really hope that you take the time to learn to help others with this. Please, by all means, share it with others. So let's do this. Let's grab our pickaxe, grab our sledgehammer, because it's Crush Your Mountain time. Let's pay close attention to this great discussion I had with Mr. Tony Lynch. Welcome to Crush Your Mountain Wellness.
Brother, thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to our conversation, man. I really do. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about you a little bit. You mentioned how losing a friend to alcoholism and depression sort of shaped some of your perspective and, some of the outcomes that happen as a result of that. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, just recently I lost a friend to alcoholism. He finally lost his battle with his demons. And so now I've been doing the work I've been doing for like 6 years. So I'm a men's grief coach. I have a nonprofit, Members of Us. I've been working with men now for better part of just over 4 years. So, the first year and some change, I was trying to figure this thing out and everything. But, what shaped everything was the loss of my parents, my younger brother and my son. And I went through a process and didn't even know it, right? And, it wasn't until I was sitting out in the middle of the desert about ready to take my life, that I realized that, that I had a problem. But then it was so much deeper than that, because once I started looking at everything I had gone through, I realized it was grief. I was going through the grieving process, but not like what people would think. I went through it according to what men actually experience. Mm-hmm. And so then from there, the mission came. I wanted to connect with other men like myself, because I had no idea what I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to do it, right? Or how I was supposed to react to it, because of the way we as men are being taught as young boys, not to cry, to man up, all those different things. So I knew what I was feeling inside, but I didn't know how to release it. And I followed the process. I went through the process and began the healing. And then it dawned on me, there was more men out there like myself. And so I was on a mission to connect with them, to provide space for us to be surrounded and to be able to learn and be supported by each other,
Yeah. That's the biggest challenge many times, is the fact that people don't realize what's going on with them. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize that oftentimes many of the actions they take, is due to the unresolved experience or continuum of grief. I help individuals to reverse type 2 diabetes, to overcome their personal challenges, to reach their goals, to crush their mountain, as it were, like the name of the show. The idea is that I've come across so many individuals that have mental health issues that, in fact, are related to their grief, or even more importantly, the illness is a manifestation of their grief. So type 2 diabetes, or why do they have it? What's happening? Their body is still dealing with this sense of fight and flight. What have you experienced when it comes to individuals dealing with the health issues related to grief?
You said the key word. A lot of people don't even know that how grief affects the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I began to learn, I really understood the depthness of how grief affects the body. We carry grief in our lungs, and grief needs to move around, and it gets trapped in various parts of the body. As a warning sign, it begins to make us sick. Like you may get somebody who turns out to have a common cold, right? That manifests itself into something different: kidney failure, fluid in the lungs, heart disease, as you said before, type 2 diabetes, right? All of these high blood pressure, cholesterol, all of these different things are a symptom of grief being trapped in the body. And so when it has nowhere to go, well, it tends to give you warning signs. It begins to make you sick. And so people will oftentimes, instead of addressing the core cause of it, they quick to go to the doctor and let the doctor put them on medication. But a lot of times the doctors don't even know. They're just going by symptoms, and they're going, well, this should treat this symptom, right? By the time you turn around, you got 10, 15 different medications and nothing's working. And so this is where the knowledge of understanding how to move grief through the body, that's where we sit down with the man and begin to go, hey, you know what I'm saying? Let's start talking about what's going on. And a lot of things are revealed.
Many times I wind up taking individuals through specific exercises. And we'd be surprised how just taking someone and letting them sit and just begin to focus on their breath, to focus deep within themselves, and just allow space for whatever comes up.
Yep.
I've had experiences where clients start laughing, or they start. You can see something on their face. They start to bunch up. They start to tense up, and I said, "What just came up for you?" And oftentimes that's when they say, "Well, I just realized how angry I am at my dad. I mean, what is it that happened? Because he died and he left me to handle everything."
Yeah.
And this would be a situation where the person's carrying that for years.
Absolutely true, right? And a lot of times people don't even understand that when men grieve, right, that is our go-to language. That's why I often tell people when men grieve, it's like a foreign love language that no one speaks. Perception versus reality, right? So when we're children, we get told, you better stop crying, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. What's our first thing that we do? We got to suck it up, right? Put our chest out. But what's our second thing that we do? We have to go out, and now we have to pick an argument. If we got siblings, we fighting with them, we arguing with them. Anger is the first sign. That's how we express ourselves, right? Because for one, as we become adults, it becomes ingrained in us. We can still hold our masculinity, right? And still have the perception of us being strong. It's the whole flight or fight. We prefer to fight because this is how we're telling people that we're hurting. Now, to someone looking in, they will often say, "Oh, that dude's crazy," and things like that. But when you get tired of fighting and things like that, right? Now you experimenting. Well, you're not really experimenting. Now you're drinking a little bit more, right? You know what I'm saying? That's not doing the job. You still got to deal with those demons that's going on. So now you add in a few other drugs, right? And then now your social circle starts to change. Now your decisions making begins to get a little bit more reckless. And you lose things. A lot of people never even understand. Have you ever asked a person that's homeless in the street how he got there?
Mm.
Have you ever asked a person that's hooked out on drugs and everything why he gave up? It's because the word tells us that no one cares. So if the world tells me that no one cares, then who am I supposed to turn to?
Mm.
I got to escape this reality because the pain is too much. So I'm going to figure out how to numb the pain,
Mm.
right? And so what if I told you that they wrote down the grieving process of men and labeled it something different? Think
Like,
about that for a minute.
like what?
Well, you ever look at the statistics between suicides, men, look at these things, right? Suicides, homelessness, addiction, you know what I'm saying? What else? The incarceration, right? Right? You know what I'm saying? Look at the numbers between men and women, right?
Mhm.
They wrote it in plain sight. You ever realize why a man goes out and gives up on life? You know what I'm saying? No matter if his life is good or anything, he still takes his wife,
Mm.
right? You ever wonder why those men that are out there that are homeless and everything, you ever wonder how they got there? And they often have a story of, man, I used to have everything, wife, kids, nice home, nice cars, money in the bank, and this, that, and another. And they were like, I give up. I can't do it anymore. Life beat them up so bad. The losses that they've had to endure, the things that they've had to see throughout the course of their life. You ever ask the man that's incarcerated why he did the things that he did? It's because somebody out there, you know what I'm saying, tested him, and he was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm done. The next person come along, I'm just gonna bust you upside your head,
Mm.
right? Survival of the fittest, right?
Mm.
Prime example. Now, here's something that was put in front of everybody, and no one really understood what was said to it. And when I say this to you, it's going to make perfect sense. So, I used to read a lot of comic books, right? You know what I'm saying? And one of my, a lot of favorite ones. And there was a crossover between Thor, the Fantastic Four, and the Hulk, right?
Mhm.
Fantastic Four, the Thing had just lost John the Storm, right? You know what I'm saying? The kid, the fire kid, right? That
Right.
was his best friend. Just lost him in a hell of a fight.
Mhm.
Um, Thor and the Hulk, two of the strongest Marvel characters that you can ever come across,
Mhm.
went over there to go see him. They didn't say anything, but the Thing wanted so bad for somebody to feel his pain, he just started humbling the Hulk and Thor. Boom, boom. And they didn't fight him back. They didn't fight him back. Boom, boom, boom. He's throwing them and everything. When it was all said and done, in the next scene, it shows them hugging each other. They
Mm.
cry.
Wow.
Now, the what I say that to say this, they knew what he needed.
Mhm.
He needed to get that out. He was hurting so bad that he didn't know how to express himself except for through that. And
Mm.
in the end, they were crying because they understood his loss.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Now take that and put it into reality. Most men will react in that same way.
Mhm.
Think about it, right?
You know, that's the bigger challenge. The bigger challenge when you think about it is that so many individuals are dealing with that loss, dealing with that sense of anger. And the challenge is that we're not superheroes. We're not in a fictional world. We're not in a fantasy world. So when we act out, there are consequences in
Mhm.
a society that only thinks in terms of punishment,
Right.
especially in terms of minority individuals. That's just it's not a political statement. It's just a fact
It
that
is.
that's the world that we live in. You know, the challenge, on the other hand, is that when we internalize and we're not addressing those griefs, they do manifest in high blood pressure. They
Mhm.
do manifest because what happens? Let's say we don't have the individual who's out and fighting and busting things up, beating people up or joining gangs, etc. We don't have that individual. What's the other part of that? The other part of that is seeking comfort through our foods. And now we wind up enslaved to a gastronomical society, these food companies that make these highly palliative, highly addictive foods, sugar being the most addictive thing probably on the planet. And now individuals, they do nothing but, so to speak, they isolate themselves and they self-soothe or self-medicate through food and alcohol and things like that. So even if they're not doing alcohol, just the obesity itself creates fatty liver disease, which creates cirrhosis of the liver, as if you were an alcoholic. And ultimately, a person is really packing on their grief. And it's not just men, it's women, but, I think about not just the African American community, but one of my friends and who's been a guest on this show was Stacey Coodley, and she's of the First Nations over in British Columbia, Canada. And her experience we can get a chance to see that one in the link, but her experience in life and dealing with what she dealt with, her trauma, she was grieving her experience and she was protecting herself as well, which caused her to physically protect herself by putting on the weight. When she realized what was going on after so many hours and so many days and months of therapy, she realized what was happening to her, and she was able to release herself from that. And she lost the weight, and she overcame that. While there's no time limit on grief, how we process it is so important. What steps do you help individuals with to help them to process their grief in a healthy way that's upbuilding for themselves and others?
Well, the first step is creating an environment where men can feel comfortable to be able to talk. What that insists of surrounding them with other men who have gone through similar things, right? Men who have walked along that path, have gotten to a certain point, and they're open to talk about what's going on. What I found was in these spaces, and these men are, because men will fill each other out, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to do that because life has taught me not to be careful about this. But once you get that big burly man over there in the corner to begin to open up about what he went through in that loss, you find that we have so many similarities across the board, and they open it up. They're breaking down, right? You know what I'm saying? And the other men are speaking life into him. They're supporting him. You might, and that one guy up in there, he's now feeling comfortable because now he feels safe enough to be able to share something that's going on with him, and you know what I'm saying, without fear of someone taking it and using it against them. That's the biggest fear of most men. I don't want to open up because, you know what I'm saying, you might take what I use against me, you know what I'm saying, and try to hurt me, right? So that's the first step is creating that environment. And the second step is to move out of his way and allow him, that individual, to speak his truth, no matter what that is. And then from there, that's when everything is revealed. What are you struggling with? Your mental health? Are you struggling with, you know what I'm saying? Because they're going to talk about these illnesses that they're enduring, whether it's heart disease, diabetes, you know what I'm saying? Being a couch potato, putting on an extra weight, and this, that, and another. And then from there, we can start to unpack it, right? They may be struggling with suicidal ideation, thinking about I'm not good enough, things like that, right? So we're going to deal with that. We deal with the person as a whole, and we don't break nothing apart. We break nothing apart. It's like you come as you are, and we begin the healing process no matter where it needs to start.
And
right?
that's important. That's so important.
Yes.
And how often do we find, because we put on a shell as men, we put on a shell, we all have our peacock moment. When we step out, we're in full regalia, so to speak, on an emotional level. But that's the shield that we're using to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, how often do you come up against individuals who are the hard nut, or the tough nut to crack, so to speak, who are still in that shit? They're there, they're present, but you have to get through the barrier.
I would say all the time. Now,
Mhm.
the other side to it is, because you got to realize you're talking about men, right? You know what I'm saying? You got to realize you're talking about men. Now, the other side to it is, yeah, they're going to come off, you know what I'm saying, hard knocks, this, that, another, I mean, just Mr. Billy Badass, you know what I'm saying? They've been fighting their whole entire life until they're in that environment. When they see that it's okay to not be okay, it changes everything. Now, when you leave outside of that group, you're going to put back on that mask, right? You know what I'm saying? You're going to leave what's said in the group, but you taking some things with you, but you still got to show up in the world because, you know what I'm saying? You still people in the world still got to earn their trust with you. Right, you know what I'm saying, and I coined that phrase of trust is earned, right? You got to earn trust in the world, trust with the people around you, and trust with yourself. So we've already earned the trust in the group. That's why a lot of times what happens inside the group, when they leave outside of the group, they tend to go back to those individuals and form friendships and brotherhoods outside of that group because that's where they feel comfortable at, right? You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, you run across it all the time. You definitely run across it all the time. You may get a little resistance here and there, but a lot of times what men would do, they will sit around, they're gonna talk a big game. I know this offhand. I was share this little story with you. I was sitting around with a man one time, he lost two of his sons, and everything. And he was always saying, "Oh man, I don't need all of this, that, and another." I didn't say nothing. He knew what I did and everything. We was with another friend of mine. I didn't say nothing. I got an amazing gift. I got an amazing gift. Now he talked all of that, but when his wife wasn't around, oh, he started opening up. He started opening up while we was in his house and things like that. And I still didn't say anything. I let him do what he needed to do. My buddy looked at me. He was like, "Dude, he's really opening up, right?" I was like, "Yeah, don't stop him, don't stop him." But as soon as his wife came back around, he had to put that mask back on because he has to be there for her and everything. He can't, you know what I'm saying? He feels like he can't let his guard down because he still got to be a protector and a provider for her. He still got to hold that masculine mask for her, right? But when we was all by ourselves, that man opened up. So even the hardest persons will only be hard around the people that he needs to be hard around. You see what I'm saying? When you surround him with those individuals that see through all of that, it changes everything. Changes everything.
Yeah. I'll tell you, what I see when it comes to people like that, I always see how individuals, they have to, and all of us, that's what we do as men. We have to be there for our loved ones. We have to be strong ones, my own story is kind of funny because, well, no, I take that back. It's not funny at all, but it's kind of strange in the sense that, when I took care of my parents, I taken care of my mom for 4 years, and winding up leaving school, leaving work, and to kind of devoting that time to her, but at the same time watching her go down, watching her, this is not the intelligent, brilliant woman that I knew. Suddenly it's Alzheimer's is called the long goodbye, and sitting there watching that was traumatic enough. However, then taking care of my dad, looking after him, moving from where I was down to North Carolina and looking after him, and my wife was as well as either. And at this point, that was a challenge too. But here's the thing: it didn't hit me until I had some space, and I was alone. I jumped in the shower, and by this time, both of them are long dead. And I sat there, and I remember I was, just kind of letting the water come down on me. And it just started going through my mind, about the stuff that was happening at that time. I was losing a very cherished position, and there was no one to talk with.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought about the times when I was so sad and when I was a kid, and I knew the one person I could go to was my mom. And I knew exactly what she would have done. And I realized at that moment that I had never grieved fully.
Yeah.
And I broke down. And that breakdown lasted for hours. You know, I had a meeting I had to go to. I was crying at that meeting. I was crying throughout the meeting and afterwards. Everybody thought it was about something else, about my stepping away from a position or other things that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
What was really going down at that point was all the pain that I didn't realize that I had of the loss of two parents. And that really, we could say it was cathartic for me, but it taught me that individuals need to hold on to their love, but realize that there's a point where they have to release the grief.
Mm-hmm.
And that put me on a different journey. And even in terms of my health, I started looking into things that helped me to process grief and also helped me to increase my wellness, my sense of self, and things like that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so this is something that most men need to sit back and think about even more so, especially when it comes to their state of health. Could it be that the reason why they're overeating, over drinking, and indulging in things that's harming the body? Could it be that they really need to address the underlying lurking situation, the state of grief that they're in? Could that be? You know?
Oh, yeah. In many, many cases. I would say I would say more than 80% of cases like that, that's exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The world, I mean, when you think about it, right? We listen to how women have been sexually assaulted from kids, they've been abused, all of these different things, right? You know what I'm saying? How they've gone through reckless relationships, but we never hear any accountability. Now the thing is that women think that they're the only ones that go through it. So when men go through it and we try to tell somebody, no one believes us. So it continues to happen to us. And then we bury it down, right? You know what I'm saying? And you said something, I want to touch on this. You talked about the loss of your parents, right? And so there's a sense of abandonment. There's a sense of feeling like an orphan in the world, right? You no longer have the people that normally you would call to get advice from. You no longer have them. So now you're stuck in the world to where you have to figure it out. And you know, and I was actually when I lost my parents, I was already on my own. So I had already learned how to live in the world without anyone.
Mm.
Now, did I get the sense of abandonment? Yeah. Did I get the sense of feeling like an orphan? Yeah. But I had already been alone so long that, you know what I'm saying? It was like, okay, you know, I just got to keep moving. I'd already, you know, I was already moving around as it was. Then I lost my younger brother, man. And then I was like, man, you know, I still got my son, right? And then my son left. Now I'm in the world again, all by myself. I'm all alone. I'm thousands of miles away from my hometown in Virginia. I'm up here alone. When I lost everything, I just kept moving. I I knew, well, instinctively, I went, I am just going to keep moving. I'm not going to give people a chance to get close to me. You know what I'm saying? And as soon as they do, I'm off again. So I always had a lone wolf mentality. right? I was like, I'm better. I remember the first time I said this statement, I was with someone and I sabotaged the whole relationship.
Mm.
And I turned around, I looked at her, she goes, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I'm better off on my own." And I left. We had a place together. I left everything. I left the furniture. I left everything, the car, everything. I packed up a backpack, a little small backpack. I took a few of my clothes and everything. Like I think I had like 5 pairs of pants, 5 pairs of underwear, socks, etc.,
Mm.
shirts and things like that. And I put it inside the bag with one pair of shoes. Put it
Mm.
inside of there. The rest of the clothes, I had a whole closet full of clothes, whole closet full of shoes. I took them and threw them all away. Didn't mean nothing else to me. And I hit the road. Didn't know where I was going. Just knew I was
Mm.
going to go. And I told myself she's better off without me.
Mm.
Right? You know what I'm saying? She deserves better than me. And I didn't understand the damage that I had done to her, right? In my slow destruction of myself, holding on to grief. You got to remember, I've lost over 400 of my friends before my parents, right? And I've seen them all pass away, being in the gangs. And, you know, so I've been homeless over 20 times in my life. Every
Mm.
time I was homeless, I just learned how to move.
Mm.
That's all. I just learned how to maneuver.
Mm.
And as time started to go, and that was years and years and years that I lived that life.
Mm.
I I I didn't want anybody to get close to me because I was tired of losing people.
Mm. Mm.
I was better off not speaking to anyone.
Mm.
So I learned just how to be quiet. I learned how to stick to the shadows, right? You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So during the daytime, if I would get a hotel room, I would stay in a hotel room, right? You know what I'm saying? And then at night I would come out and kind of move.
Mm.
And you know what I'm saying? And then that's when I would make my moves. I go back and stay inside all day long during the daytime. So no one really ever saw me. These people like, didn't that guy, is that guy still there? And stuff like that. I would hear him. I wouldn't say anything. I knew how to be real quiet. Right. And people would come and try to hang out, knock on the hotel door, and I wouldn't say anything. I
Mm.
just sit there, real quiet. I don't think he's there. And then next thing you know, I'm gone. I don't need you getting close to me, right? Because for one, I don't know if you're going to try to hurt me. And if I'm not going to allow you to hurt me. And so therefore, to keep me from hurting you, it's better I go ahead about my way. Man, I destroyed so many women in my path
Mm.
because I was destroying myself. That term, hurt people, that's a true statement, man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? But that's what it was though, man. I was so afraid of letting, like I would go days and days and days without eating. Right? I would starve myself and just keep it moving.
So at what point did you realize that it was the grief, and then it was the fear born of the grief that was moving you? At what point did you realize that?
When I found myself in the middle of the desert, about ready to take my life, and I realized I no longer had a fear of dying.
Mm.
That's where, so that's where it all started to make sense. I was so tired, man. I was tired.
Mm.
Um, I had no direction.
Mm.
I had nobody to talk to. I felt like no one cared about what I was going through.
Mm.
And I remember driving out to the middle of Utah to the Moab Desert. I drove all the way out to the middle of the desert, and I planned this thing out so strategically, right? You know, I had planned out the weekend. You know, I was at work. I was driving a trash truck at the time, and I decided, you know, that weekend I knew that I had it open. I was just going to drive out there, and I had no intentions of coming back. And I sat out there, and I was just like, and I knew right then and there when I pulled out the gun and I put it to my head, I knew when I didn't have any fear. The fear was gone.
Mm.
And I said, okay, I can go through with this. And divine intervention, that voice came and started talking to me as loud as day, as like I'm talking to you. And he said, hey, whoa, hold on. Before you do that, I need to talk to you. And that's where this thing called grief showed up. And it began to hug me. And they
Mm.
began to teach me. Like I downloaded all of this stuff. Man, I never read a book on grief. I've
Mm.
never read a book on grief. but somehow this information came,
Mm.
and I followed it. I followed the path, I followed the voice. I began to hold myself accountable, and I still didn't know anything about healing until I started addressing those things. I said, man, I wonder how far I can go with this. And it began to unveil so many other things. And I began healing myself from that. And then I got down to the root cause, and I went, that's why I am the way I am. And I had to go back through, and I had to get rid of everything that I held dear to in order for it to be replaced for those things that I thought for the things I needed. And I built that up inside of me. And I realized that the grief was my mentor. I tapped into my gift, right? My gift was born out of pain in order for me to be a blessing in other people's lives. So I say capitalize on my pain so you don't have to struggle the way that I did. And I'm willing to give this to you free because it's not mine. And so once I began to hone in on it, my life changed. And it took me down this path that was so unknown that I got excited for. And I was just like, man, let's see where this thing goes. And I've been following the path ever since then.
Yeah. And you help individuals, and that's the thing about it. Tony, you and I see eye to eye on helping people in so many different ways. And the only thing I envy is you're way out there in the palm trees and at the beach. I don't know. But I'll tell you, I hear your grief, I hear your pain, but I hear your success and your triumph, how you use that as a way of teaching yourself and then teaching others, helping others. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we need to do to continue to do that in mentoring all individuals, all men in particular, because not every man is at that point where they can admit to themselves who they are and where they are. You see? And where I see a shift in society, but it's not entirely a shift for the better always. The fact of the matter is that individuals, as males, we need to take the time to be real with ourselves, mm-hmm. and then find someone to help us to do the processing.
Right.
That's very important. Even the Bible itself says that if one is seeking, if one is isolating himself, he starts to seek his own selfish longing. He starts to do things against common sense. Okay, he'll break forth against all wisdom. In other words, it's to your detriment to be alone with your unprocessed grief. It will tear you down. It will give you cancers, if it will. It will give you high blood pressure. It will give you type 2 diabetes. It will make you an angry person. It will make you not just a sad person. In many cases, it can make you a dangerous person. But most importantly, it's just tearing you down. And you have individuals like yourself and me, and other counselors who have decades worth of experience, mm-hmm. that can help individuals. But we see things from the perspective of African-American men.
Right.
Can I add to that, please?
I want to add to that because I love that you said that, and you're not wrong. You know what I'm saying? When 96% of men are by themselves, they will slowly start to destroy themselves because they're trying to deal with something that is a group effort. Now you have myself, right? I dealt with mine alone. I didn't have anyone to come and tell me, that was okay not to be okay. I learned all of this stuff going through the process. I fell in love with the process. Now, do I recommend it? No, I don't recommend it. That's why I do what I do. I went alone. I did this alone in the darkness of my life. And I found how to climb out of this well that had no handles. Mm. And every time I begin to heal a certain part of me, the dirt that I felt that was falling over the top of my head, I began to use it to step up on. And finally, I was at the top, right? And I don't recommend it for anyone. It is hard. It is extremely hard, but I'm glad that I did it alone. I didn't have any therapists, right? And the people that were therapists, they didn't have the experience. So I knew I wasn't going to trust them. Why would I want to do that, right? But I am so glad that I had the opportunity to experience firsthand what it would take to become a better version of myself, to be comfortable with telling my story to people. And honestly, to be open enough to becoming more of my authentic self and understanding in depth what my gift truly required of me. And that's what allows me to go around other men and show them the importance of being connected to other men.
Yes.
Right. So it was the reverse thing for me. I was alone. There was nobody there to tell me, hey, Tony, you're messing up, dude. Now I figured it out, right? By bumping my head up against it, did I struggle? Yeah, I struggled. I almost didn't make it, right? You know what I'm saying? There was many times where I was thinking to myself, like, I don't want to do this anymore. There was times, my brother, well, I was so tired of, and it wasn't a physical tired, it was a mental tired, where I used to sit down on the side, it's just underneath the tree and go, God, if you were sitting here right now, I would tell you, I would beg and plead for you to take me out of this. That grief was hitting me hard, and it was revealing everything. And God would say, take a breath. I need you to breathe. And I go, no, look, I got the white flag, man. I'm gonna throw it in the ring. And I just remember every time I did it, God would pick up the towel and go, wipe your head. You got more to go. You know what I'm saying? Come on, get up. I can't get up for you, but I need you to get up. And I would. And I get up and I take that next step. And then one day I looked around and I realized my shoulders was back. I was standing upright. I had a smile on my face. I was a little straggly in the face, but I shaved that stuff off and I just had to shave the head because, and then next thing you know, life began to make a little bit more sense to me. And nowadays, I have a saying. I tell people, grief, I'm in love with grief, right? Grief is my all-time lover because it never left me. And everything else is my mistress. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like grief don't mind if I cheat on it with you. You know what I'm saying? Because he knows I'm gonna come, it knows I'm gonna come back to it. But it's the connectiveness. And I joke about it, right? You know what I'm saying? But it's just something that I have fun with and things like that. It gets people to start laughing, but also opens up the doors to have that conversation. And so, but I'm dead serious. I fell in love with this thing called grief and everything, the mystery, all the roads that has taken me down, and the people that has put me in front of, and the opportunity to be able to become more of who I am in my unconscious mind and how we all connect in the universe, and to bring back, and like you said, to understand how it really affects us, but also coming up with healthy solutions for those individuals to be able to allow themselves to properly grieve and become healthier versions of themselves moving forward.
So that said, my friend, I mean, this has been so amazing and moving, and I know a lot of men are going to benefit from this. I can only applaud you for not taking the path out in the desert, but coming back from the desert and being the man that you have become. And I have only one more question to ask you, and I ask this of all my guests as we close out the show, because I am so grateful for you to just to have you hang out with me like this. So, Tony Lynch, okay, what does it mean to you to crush your mountain?
To endure so you can overcome. To allow yourself to go through the emotions and come out in a more creative way, tapping into that thing that you love and putting it out into the world and letting the world see you for who you are. That's how you crush your mountain, not being able to show up authentically who you is. There's strength and courage in that. Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you something. I don't think there's anyone that could address this subject with that concept of crushing your mountain, because grief is a huge one. And that's one of those where it doesn't, it's not just one guy, okay? It can be, just like my man Tony, it could have been, but really, why do it alone when you can have a mining crew? You see, the idea of crushing your mountain is that grabbing that pickaxe, grabbing your sledgehammer, and just chipping away at it and get until you get to the light at the end of the tunnel. Grief is a tough one. It's basically the Everest of mountains when it comes to challenges.
Yeah.
And so in a case like that, we're not even talking about climbing and trying to get through blizzards and stuff. We are talking about getting through it. You grab the mining crew. Somebody's going to have the dynamite. Somebody's going to have a pickaxe, and you're going to chop at your grief, and it doesn't go away.
No.
But you see a light at the end of the tunnel, because now that you have processed it, you see it for what it is, you understand it, and you can become okay with it.
Yes.
Resolution, you see, having the peace that a person needs.
That's
so I really want to thank you so much for taking this time with us. And we're gonna tell us what's on the horizon for you, and where can our people reach out to you?
Several places. You can find me on Facebook as Tony Lynch. You can find my my support group, which is Members of Us LTD, which is a group for men. You can find me on IG, Men's Grief Support. You can find me on LinkedIn as Tony Lynch. You can go to my website, www.mensgriefsupport.org. Or either if you're a grief worker, you're looking for a place to connect with like-minded individuals, I have another organization called the Global Grief Network. Go there, collaborate. We got some beautiful things coming up, but also, if you want to stay connected or things like that, they can check out my magazine.
Tony, I really want to thank you so much for being with us and sharing your experience, your personal pain, but also helping individuals to see how important it is to release the challenge, release the trauma, the negative energy. By the way, the name of his magazine is Grief Talk Magazine. It's online, you can get it there. And I believe there's also a paper edition, hard copy, if you want to go the hard copy route. But I'll tell you, in this episode of Crush Your Mountain Wellness, we tackled a heavy topic, that of processing grief and trauma, especially within the African-American community. We talked about how unresolved grief can wreak havoc on mental and physical health, particularly for men who are often seen as, they're supposed to keep it all in, suppress their emotions. We talked about how societal pressures can lead to destructive behaviors, and violence is rife in various communities. And could it be the underlying problem is trauma and grief? So some key points that we talked about: the importance of recognizing and releasing emotions, creating safe spaces for men to open up and to communicate without fear or judgment, understanding the physical toll of unresolved grief, from obesity to liver disease and other illnesses, seeking help through therapy, community, or a coach or a trusted network, having the power of vulnerability as a path of health and growth, healing and growth. All those things are vital. So guess what? I've got some action steps for you. If you're dealing with unresolved, unrelieved grief or trauma, there are 5 things you want to take into consideration. Now, what I also ask you to do is, after you write these things down or hear them over again, let me know which one works for you, which one appeals to you. What have you done in terms of addressing that grief, addressing that trauma? How to mitigate grief? Action step number one, we want to acknowledge your emotions. You don't want to suppress them. You see, you want to embrace them. The other thing, number two, find a safe space. Surround yourself with people who will support you and be there with you and understand. Number three, seek professional help. A grief coach or someone like a health coach or a therapist that can guide you through the process, the one that can get you from point A to point B, where you need to actually be. Number four, you want to engage in self-care. And a lot of men, we don't do that enough. We're the breadwinners many times. We're the ones taking care of the household. Many times we're just trying to make it through the week, you see? And we don't take the time to really do proper self-care. Prioritize physical health, whether it's exercise, eating well, or mindfulness. And by the way, the combination of those three is the optimum thing to do. So if you're able to take some time to do some exercise, if you're able to take some time to choose your food wisely, and then take the time to get still within yourself and address what may be challenging and troubling you. We talked a little bit about that during the show, how some of my clients, in those moments, some emotional things come up, and we have to address them. Do that. Make sure that you can take care of yourself by engaging in that type of self-care. And then finally, share your story. Be one that would open up. You not only heal yourself, but you heal others. You encourage others to heal, you see? So remember those 5 points, you see, and take care of yourself so that your negative energy can be turned into something positive to help young ones. There's so many young individuals that need that help. So listen, I hope this information was helpful to you. I hope it was of value to you. If you're dealing with any sort of challenges like that, if you're dealing with type 2 diabetes, and part of that is due to the emotional eating that has happened along the way, I encourage you to go ahead and reach out, leave it some information right in the comments if you'd like. Just let us know what you think, if this has helped you in any sort of way. And then what we can do to provide even further support. In the meantime, release your grief, embrace your grief, and understand that we are working together as a mining operation so that we can not just endure or climb a mountain, but crush through it. I'll see you next time.